Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be talking to you about my research paper, which is named Train Track Trouble, and it's about integrating European railway. So the table of contents, we'll start with an introduction, then a problem statement, a justification of interdisciplinary research, analysis of disciplinary perspectives, finding common ground, integrating insights, and then a conclusion. This is Amsterdam Centraal. Right, introduction. So why this subject? There's a patchway of railway across Europe, but it's not well integrated internationally, so it's very hard to travel by train, and it's costly and it's time consuming. There's been long-standing plans of the European Union to improve these things, but they haven't happened yet, and I want to find out why. So I dove into it. This is Utrecht Centraal. Alright, so what's actually the problem? Well, first of all, there's low interoperability, so it's very hard to actually go across a border with a train system because the signaling systems are wrong, the linguistic barriers are there, there's managerial barriers. Second of all, it's unpopular for travel within Europe, even though a lot of people want to travel by train. Not a lot of people do it, only 7%. And third of all, high-speed train travel, which was seen as sort of a solution to these problems, is not working well. This is a Termini station in Rome. Alright, so what's our research question then? It's what are the barriers to implementation of the European rail network for personal transport, and we'll be using economics, political science, and history to solve this research question. This is the Hauptbahnhof in Berlin. Alright, so justification of interdisciplinary approach. Well, first of all, we need economics because we need to compare actually the costs of building railways with, for example, the costs of flying, but also just in general analyze why it's so costly to build railway. We need to use political science for understanding why the decision-making process that leads to long delays is still in place. Why can't that go faster? What's the political will? Why is the decision-making going so slowly? And then history to sort of investigate the distrust between different countries regarding train track, because most of these countries don't actually trust each other, and there's a very good reason for that. This is the Estación da Toca in Madrid. Alright, so first economics. I've put down two journeys, Eindhoven-Budapest and Eindhoven-Skopje. We'll go to that in the next one. Eindhoven-Budapest by train takes you 14 hours and costs you 63 euros. Eindhoven by flight costs you 98 euros, but is done in 2 hours. You have to transfer 4 times to make sure you're on time in Budapest. So it's actually very hard to get there, and there's large sunken costs of building train tracks as well. It's an estimated 500 billion euros over the next 15-20 years. There's low flexibility to demand, so if a plane finds out that there's more demand for a certain location, they just fly there more. If train companies find that out, it's very hard to actually build more track or get more trains on the tracks because there's large sunken costs up front. Also, the low popularity of travelers due to long travel times and high costs means that actually this time is getting longer and these costs are getting higher because high demand would lower price. Alright, economics 2. So what did they do in the 1990s? They said we'll separate track from wagons, so that makes competitiveness higher. We can sort of compete on tracks now. But that actually didn't happen. They said they weren't forcing countries to run lines that are not commercially viable, but instead what they did is just sort of destroy sleeper trains, decrease the amount of trains that were driven across borders. They liberalized the train tracks, but it backfired massively. This is Warsaw. Alright, political science, also important. Eindhoven-Skopje by flight is actually 160 euros in 2 hours, but if you want to do it by public transport, it's not even possible. This is a bus which takes you 110 euros and 38 hours. It's made hard by choice. So there's investments in road and airways that are far outstripping investments in train tracks, and also the VATs and excise duties that are taken out for air travel give an unfair advantage compared to trains. There's also no common ticketing system in the European Union, despite people arguing for that, thanks to the member states, because I guess they just don't want to make it easy. Alright, political science then. There's high support for bans on short distance flights, political science too, but they just don't put them in. You can still fly to Berlin, you can still fly to Paris from Amsterdam. It's the greenest travel option per mile, but the least funded, And the ERTMS, which should solve some of these problems, which is the European Trail Traffic Management System, is stalling, with over 90% of it still having to be installed, even though it was sort of supposed to be the uniform signaling system that would solve all sorts of issues. So there's no political will to mandate the integration of the train track, it seems. Also, this is Budapest, and this is Skopje train station. Alright, what about the historic things then? Well, there's distrust towards other countries when it comes to rail, because it's the fastest way of moving large amounts of troops. It's also important for state building. It's a national affair, so railways were sort of connecting the country in the 18th and 19th century, and maybe countries don't want to get involved with other countries when it comes to that. But they're also important nodes, they're connections between states, and they were before the prominence of cars, and they will probably be after cars are made moot. They're able to connect ideas, people, and innovation, so we need to move back towards where train stations and railway was seen as the messenger of ideas. Also, there's old tracks, we're still using the tracks from the 20th century, and they're not always the most efficient routes. This is Prague train station. Alright, then the integration of insights. So historically, economically, and politically, it's just very difficult to integrate the European train tracks. Mostly because it's missing substantial financial backing and political will. These two go hand in hand. There's no political will, so there's no financial backing, despite everyone saying there is. And this leads to managerial, technical, and linguistic barriers. There's just no vision. They just don't want it to happen. So that's also why I picked Brussels Central Station for this one. Alright, then we need to find common ground. So the common ground is actually that the problems that I'm describing in the last 7 minutes are all the same, namely, it's slow integration. We need to have it moving faster. We need to see more integration. We need to have more sustainable travel, but it just doesn't happen. This is most visible on the European Railway ERTMS, because Germany, France, and Italy all actually had their own signaling systems, but they refused to give them up, so the EU had to create their own signaling system. So I hope to come to you with a conclusion about why this is, and maybe also how we can fix this. For now, this is my presentation, and we'll end with the beautiful Garo d'Oriente in Lisbon.